I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Amid the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has reported that Israel has received bodies of two deceased hostages from Red Cross in Gaza. There's so far no information on the identities of the deceased hostages. US President Donald Trump has stated and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed to cut US tariffs on China from 57% to 47% in exchange for Beijing's actions on the fentanyl trade and pause on rare earth export curbs. US President Donald Trump ordered the US military to immediately resume testing nuclear weapons for the first time in 33 years. This comes just after Russia's announcement of successful nuclear tests. Russia has launched a barrage of drones and missiles at Ukraine's energy infrastructure overnight. The strikes have claimed 3 lives. The strikes have forced a nationwide power shutdown as well and restrictions. Brazilian officials have assured that events linked to the upcoming COP30 climate summit will be held safe following a deadly police crackdown in Rio that has left at least 132 dead in the country's deadliest operation. Hurricane Melissa has left a trail of destruction across the Caribbean, killing at least 25 people in Haiti and 4 in Jamaica. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced that the United States is prepared to provide immediate humanitarian aid to Cuba. Afghanistan and Pakistan have agreed to restart peace talks in Istanbul at Turkey's request after earlier discussions collapsed, according to sources' statements on Thursday. This comes amid border clashes that have killed dozens this month as tensions rise between them. Now we start with US-China. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for steady progress in China-US relations, comparing the partnership to a giant ship that must sail smoothly through challenges. Xi has made the remarks during a meeting with US President Donald Trump in Busan, South Korea, on the sidelines of the APEC summit. She has said that since Trump's re-election, the two leaders have stayed in close contact, speaking 3 times by phone and exchanging letters. He has added that recent trade consultations in Kuala Lumpur led to a basic consensus on key economic concerns. She has acknowledged that it's normal for the world's 2 largest economies to face differences, but has urged both sides to stay the right course and guide relations forward. Let's in fact listen into Xi Jinping's statements.
就解决各自当前的主要关切大问题的同时，也为我们今天的会晤提供了必要条件。中美两国国情不同，难免有一些分歧。作为世界前2大经济体，时而也会有摩擦，这很正常。面对风浪的挑战，我和总统先生作为掌舵人，应当把握好方向价值，让中美关系这次达成平稳前行。
Now for this discussion, we welcome Arvind Mahajan Lamar. He's a savings professor of finance, Texas A&M University. Joins us live from Texas. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Professor, how is it different if you look back at Trump's handling of US-China relationship from his first term to his second term?
Well, certainly things got very hot earlier part of this year when the President Trump decided to dramatically increase tariffs on China. And that was not quite the case during the first term. So the president has been quite aggressive in dealing with China and much more serious about cutting down the trade deficit. That is at least the announced intention behind the tariffs, is to cut down on the trade deficit which the U.S. faces. Uh, and since that time, the rhetoric has been pretty hot. And this meeting, I think, somewhat calms things down. There was a lot of tension as the impact of U.S.-China relationships impacts many other countries as well. And I think this particular visit has calmed things down, although I think this is just a truce. It is not durable peace. This is a very tentative arrangement, and most of the details and critical issues still need to be addressed.
And building on that, what do you think were the sticking points in this year's meeting, as they last time met in 2019? That was almost more than 6 years ago.
Right. So, I mean, I think one of the issues which became very critical was the Chinese putting restrictions on the export of rare earth minerals, because that has deep consequences for a variety of industries in the US, along with, of course, many other countries. So I think that was a win for the US, where China agreed to ease on export of these rare minerals. But this is short term. This is just for 1 year. China has also agreed to buy American soybeans that had caused significant pain to the farmers in the United States, and they happen to be strong backers of the president. So that will certainly come as a big relief to the farmers, because China had switched from buying American soy to Brazilian and other countries. So that is a big win for the US. On the other hand, the US has agreed to reduce the tariffs by 10%. So the average tariff on Chinese goods right now are 47%. Of course, the president at one time had announced that the tariffs are going to be 145%. So some relief there. Both countries have agreed to what is our understanding at this point, a pause on port fees, which the two countries had imposed on each other. So there has been some relief, and that relief will show up in calming down sensibilities around the world as well. But I will repeat that this is just a marginal agreement. This is not the grand bargain. These tensions will continue for an extended period of time.
And we know that Trump is also planning to meet or visit China next April. So how do you think, why did Trump decide on that already way ahead of the meeting? And do you think there are some kind of tactic from Trump's side or motive from Trump's side that he is trying to get closer to Xi Jinping or China?
Well, I mean, yeah, clearly. I mean, President Trump and both President Xi Jinping understand and recognize that this current meeting in South Korea provided only a tentative relief in the trade relationship between the two countries. The competition between the US and China is serious, severe, and deep. And I think both countries will gain time when next time they meet again in April. From what I understand, then President Xi subsequently will be visiting US as well. So I think there's a lot of homework which needs to be done on both sides. And this simply gives both countries more time to reflect upon and clarify their strategy and position in negotiating with each other.
With that, I would like to thank Professor Arvind Mahajan for joining us all the way from Texas and sharing that insight. Now we move on to Middle East. Tensions have flared in Ankara as Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has accused Germany of ignoring what he described as atrocities and famine in Gaza during a joint press conference with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Erdogan has criticized Berlin for overlooking Israel's actions, alleging that Israel possesses nuclear and advanced weapons, while Palestinian groups have none. The remarks come amid renewed Israeli strikes on Gaza despite a fragile ceasefire. Let's listen in to what the Turkish president has said.
Bakıldığında Türkiye birlik ilişkilerinin Sayın Şansölye'nin bir konusuna maalesef katılamıyorum. O da şudur. Bir defa bu süreç içerisinde ne yazık ki 60 bini aşkın çocuk, kadın, yaşlı burada öldürülmüştür. Ve Hamas'ın elinde bombalar yok. Hamas'ın elinde nükleer silah yok. Ama bu silahların hepsi İsrail'in elinde mevcut var ve İsrail bu silahları kullanarak örneğin dün akşam yine bu bombalarla özellikle Gazze'yi vurmuştur. Bunları Almanya olarak sizler görmüyor musunuz? Almanya olarak bunları takip etmiyor musunuz?
This comes as Chancellor Merz, making his first official visit to Turkey, reaffirmed his view of Turkey as a close partner of the European Union and has expressed interest in expanding economic and transport ties. Both sides also discussed migration management and the return of failed asylum seekers, signaling a willingness to keep communication channels open despite political strain. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Dr. Satoru, now Erdogan made such statements, sharing critique about Germany's stance in Gaza. Do you think this could stray Turkey's chances on joining EU in any way?
In this case, the sensitivity of the issue related to Israel is very important to understand the German stance. Indeed, when we check the former axis of evil, the American said, the Axis countries in the World War II, indeed, most of these countries hesitate to recognize the Palestinian state, even if they have the will to support the Palestinian state. Because these Axis countries worry about their history related with the Jews during the World War II. And in case of Germany, of course, they should feel the responsibility. That's why that is a very important reason for Germany cannot show the strong stance to criticize Israel. That is one thing. And of course, indeed, so you can see which country hasn't recognized the Palestinian state is Germany, Italy, Japan, Finland, Hungary, all of these axes in the World War II. But anyway, that is one thing. Another thing is, indeed, this visit is very important. So that's why President Erdogan's stance is a little interesting. Even if he criticized, he tried to cooperate with Germany because he want to buy the new Typhoon fighter jet from the British, but this Typhoon fighter jet is a joint project with British and Germany and Italy, I think. So that's why this fighter jet, if Erdogan want to buy, in this case, Erdogan need to cooperate with Germany in the defense sector, especially Germany hesitate to provide this. because currently Erdogan faces some problem because since his government decided to buy the S-400 missile from Russia, American impose sanctions to Turkey, and Turkey cannot access enough level of information to the F-35. So that's why the alternative fighter jet is needed. And in this case, the Typhoon is a very important candidate. But Typhoon, without Germans' permission, they cannot buy. So that's why this cooperation is indeed important. So one thing, President Erdogan criticized Germany, but another thing is President Erdogan want to cooperate with Germany. That is the situation he is facing, and the German side visit Turkey, not because to receiving the criticism about the Middle Eastern policy, the promote the defense cooperation with Turkey is matter. So can they join the EU or something like that? Of course, like under current situation, the President Erdogan does not interest in joining the EU. I think in this case is opposition party more like joining the EU. But anyway, they are they are also part of the Europe. So even if they are part of the Middle East or connected with Central Asia as ethnic, so that's why Turkey's stance is, of course, cooperative to the NATO, I think.
With that, I would like to thank Dr. Satoru Nagao for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on. Brazil is reeling after a police raid in Rio de Janeiro has left at least 130 people dead, making it the deadliest operation in the country's history. The pre-dawn assault targeted the Comando Vermelho, or Red Command gang, in Rio's Penha and Alemão favelas, low-income neighborhoods long plagued by violence. Officials said 2,500 police and soldiers took part in the raid, which authorities claim was planned for months. What followed was described by residents as a massacre. Dozens of bodies were later laid out in the streets as protesters demanded justice, accusing security forces of executions and excessive force. President Lula da Silva has said that he was horrified by the scale of the killings and has ordered an investigation after learning the federal government was not informed in advance of these operations. The UN and Human Rights Watch have condemned the raid, calling for Brazil to end its cycle of police brutality in poor communities. Governor Claudio Castro, however, defended it as a success against organized crime, deepening the national divide over security and state violence. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Doctor, for staying with us. Now, how can Rio de Janeiro's government verify or justify such extreme violence when reports suggest executions and mutilations?
And that's my interesting point, because of in case of the crime in the Brazil, indeed this is a very serious issue, and the so-called favela, the poor people gathering this town is, of course, there is a life in this place, the very important place, but at the same time, the gang's influence is very strong. They are controlling the area, and police cannot enter them. Something like that is the situation in Brazil. So that's why to maintain the law and order or improve the law and order, in this case, something like the army-like operation is needed. And so that's why such kind of something a little bit extreme method has imposed is one of the option. As one of the option, it has possible, even if this is not legal. So that's why it has happened, I think. So this looks like urban warfare situation. This is not just a normal law and order level. So that's one of the reasons, I think. But at the same time, if the government need to do such kind of extreme measures, this is a responsibility of the government's work for a long time. So this is not good anyway.
How do you think that government will take or will do or will have to do to make sure the trust is gained back, and for the government of Lula da Silva, and for their image?
Of course, government's image is important, but firstly, they need to cracking down the crime perpetrated by the gangs. So that's why how to eliminate power of the gang is needed. Getting the heart and mind is very important to win such kind of the battle. That is true, and that is the reason the bad image is has a bad effect. That is true, but at the same time, even if the temporary, they need to down the level of the gangs violence and gangs one kind of the military capability is needed. That is also true. So that's why the rule-based cracking down is the base of the police operation. That is true. So this must be legal. That is true. But at the same time, reality is it looks like war, and it is very difficult for police to do to improve the law and security situation without using some things, extreme measures, they believe. That is reality, I think.
With that, I would like to thank Dr. Satoru Nagao for joining us and sharing that insight and staying with us throughout our news. Thank you. Now we move on to our next news. After more than 3 decades of operation, Radio Free Asia has shuttered amid the U.S. government shutdown on March 15. The Trump administration terminated funding for RFA, which led to staff being laid off and its service being limited. It will be the first time the international broadcaster has completely gone off air since it was founded nearly 30 years ago. Created through legislation to combat human rights abuses in Asia, RFA began operating in 1996 with the mission to deliver uncensored domestic independent news and information to Asian nations with poor media environments and few, if any, free speech protections, including China, North Korea, Myanmar, and others. Prominent human rights activist Yakui Wang, currently a senior China researcher at Human Rights Watch, has called for alternative funding for RFA. Now we move on to our next news. The United Nations Security Council is holding an emergency briefing on Sudan as the humanitarian and security situation deteriorates, particularly in El Fasher, Darfur. Millions are facing starvation and displacement, with hospitals, schools, and IDP camps under attack, and entire neighborhoods emptied as families flee the RSF militia. UN officials, including Martha Ama Akia Pobe and Tom Fletcher, will brief the 15-member council, while Sudan and the UAE participate under Rule 37. The meeting follows sanctions renewals in September 2025 and addresses concerns over civilian protection, foreign interference, and the RSF's rejected declaration of a rival administration. The Council aims to discuss humanitarian pauses, security concerns, and the expanding conflict to facilitate aid and protect civilians. Now for this discussion, we welcome Ayunuga Olugbenga Paul. He's a public affairs analyst, joins us live from Lagos. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, looking at this, what more can you tell us about the dire situation there, and how effective could you and also African Union be in addressing the escalating crisis in Sudan?
I think with this crisis in Sudan, both the UN Security Council and African Union are acting like toothless bulldogs. And this is not the first time they are acting like that. Remember during the genocide in Rwanda back in 1993, 1994, it took them 100 days after a massacre of over 800,000 people before UN could say they get their act right and intervene appropriately. And this reason why the UN Security Council seems like a toothless bulldog in this case is that majority of those who holds the UN by the jugular, namely the United States of America and China and Russia, are all interested third parties in the conflict. We can hide behind the finger and try to be politically correct and not call names, but I believe that these are the people, if you remove the external influence and interest of countries like France, countries like US, China, Russia, that is fueling this conflict, and Britain that is fueling this conflict from the outside, that is making it impossible for there to be resolution, I think we would have gotten solution faster. So they, on one hand, pretend like they are helping to find solution and resolve the crisis, and on another hand, behind the scene, supplying different militia and armed rebels with weapons and thereby escalating the crisis. And the fact that this war is tending towards tribal war makes it also harder for the solution that we will hope or to see to come faster. Don't forget that 15 years after South Sudan got their independence, it was like the northern Sudan were ganging up to, suppress the South Sudan. Now that South Sudan is off the hook, the North Sudan are facing off each other with the Arab tribes and the non-Arab tribes, trying to gain control. And this brings a dimension that is not so easily to resolve. If you add to that the external influences, because with this war and instability, it is easier for all these external influences to buy their oils at dirt cheap prices, to mine their mineral resources at dirt cheap prices, and even illegally, hiding under the cover of the ongoing war. And this plays into the hand of all these international enterprises from countries who are sitting at the UN Security Council. And so, because of that, it is really hard to get the peace accord. But as it seems now, if both parties do not find a middle ground, there will be no one left. The massive carnage that is taking place will continue to get bigger till it engulfs the whole nation, because the state is teetering towards a failed state as it seems now. And one of the solutions that could easily be on the table is maybe to balkanize Sudan again, to form two different countries so that the Arabic indigents or people of Sudan can have their own country. The non-Arabic, can also have their own country. Whilst this will only even result, because even among the Arabic, there is the superior and the not so superior Arabic tribe that would also lead to another set of conflicts entirely. But I hope that this Security Council will get its act together, and the African Union too will stop playing the ostrich and look at this matters very with all
Yes.
seriousness, and find a lasting solution if it requires developing boots on the ground to help calm the tense between situation, because you see that in the last few days now, the attacks on IDP camp, on hospitals, I mean, there is hardly anywhere for anyone to go. Before now, they've been battling the food shortage, the non-access to humanitarian aid, and then the massive death tolls is leading to also health crisis, because many of people are dying faster than they get buried.
Yes, and Ayanuga, as you mentioned in your answer, that this is partly because of the division in non-Arab Sudanese and Arab Sudanese. And if I recall, years ago when South Sudan got independence, it was due to the religion background in the region. Do you think this could lead to another country as well?
I believe that one of the fastest solutions that is low-hanging fruit is to start discussion about having another country, so that let only people who want to stay together, those who don't want to stay together. Because you see, when tribes and religion come into conflict, it is really very hard to solve. And if Europe is having very tiny countries like Monaco with 34,000 people refusing to be part of France but an independent nation, country like Liechtenstein, country like so many countries in Europe. You have countries that are just 300,000 people in Europe, 500,000 in Europe, and they are independent country on their own. Even some of those countries do not have their own police. Like Monaco now uses the French police. They don't have their own ball tournament like the Ligue 1. The Monaco team plays in the Ligue 1, but Monaco is an independent country, for example. So why can't Sudan, if that will bring solution, let it not even be two countries. Let it be that as many parts that want to stay together will stay together. Those who don't want to stay together, let them form a country, form a government, and try to solve their issues independently, and let the borders be created to that effect.
Yes, indeed. Great learning from you. Thank you very much, Ayanuga Olukbenga-Paul, for joining us as a public affairs analyst from Lagos. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. 3 men with dual German and Russian citizenship have been found guilty of espionage by a court in Munich, Germany. The men were convicted of spying for Russia, with the main defendant, Dieter S., also found guilty of membership in a terrorist organization, the People's Republic of Donetsk, which Germany officially classifies as a terrorist group. Dieter S. has been sentenced to 6 years in prison, while his 2 co-defendants received suspended sentences of 1 year and 6 months. Prosecutors said the men gathered information on railway lines and military transports connected to Germany's support for Ukraine. The court has found their aim was to spread fear and pressure the government to stop aiding Kyiv. All 3 men denied the charges, with Dieter S. calling his actions a charade. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates.